Hey, this is Rob Anspach, and welcome back to another edition of E-Heroes for those keeping count. This is episode 348, and my next guest first appeared here in June of 2018, 7 years ago, and that was episode 21. Then he returned on episode 114 in December of 2020. And, we always say third time's a charm. So I
I
want to
hope
welcome
so.
back personal injury attorney Brian Chase, and thanks for being here.
Hey, Rob, thanks for having me back for a third time. I hope third time is a charm. We've covered a lot of information. I cannot believe 2017 was the
Yeah,
first time we
2018.
did it, or
2018
2018.
was the first one, and then
Now you're,
2020. So you haven't been on here for 5 years, and
I must have offended you and said something bad on social media. I apologize in advance.
you can't offend me. I don't
I
care
know.
what you do.
No, no. With your wit and sarcasm, it would have to be very hard to offend you. And if anybody did, you would zing them back so hard they would never try to offend you again.
It's social media is one of those things where I think I've my sarcasm has gone on high alert.
Mm.
Um, and I've watched you for years. I mean, you and your team have put out a lot of great stuff. But one of the videos I think is one of the greatest things that you've done, and it starts out with "We are here to help you,"
Mhm.
and or it ends that way, and it's one of the most sincerest videos because you're dealing with people that their lives are devastated from injuries. And it's and nowhere in the video do you talk about money or price or you talk about the human being.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and to me, I think that's one of the traits that makes you not only an hero, but a respected attorney worldwide.
Yeah, well, thank you for saying that. I know that I do appreciate that, and I know we were talking before we got started here on other matters. And if all you do is something for money or glory or all of those kinds of things, you're not going to fail. There's got to be a bigger driver, even though we all want to get paid for what we do.
Hmm.
And I know from our other interviews, you've asked me, and one of my drivers to go to law school is I wanted my life's work to matter
Hmm.
and how I've been envious of doctors that get to save a life. And so a really, really huge important piece is what you just touched on is when you're dealing with clients and people that have suffered, huge harms and losses, you have to really care about that. You can't fake that and it can't be insincere.
Yeah.
And so that is a big part of our culture. We call it, the client experience, and everybody probably has some version of that. But with us, it's real.
Yeah.
We really pride ourselves on that. So thank you for noticing that.
But you go beyond that, and we've talked about this, and I remember this conversation where you do backpacks for the community,
Yeah,
and there's not a lot of attorneys that go the extra mile, and so you might have these wins, and you help your clients, kind of piece the puzzle back together in their life. But then you give back to the community with these backpacks and other things that you do that goes beyond the law.
yeah. No, I mean it's important. To whom much is given, much is expected, or whatever that quote is. And I've been very blessed. And it feels good, and it's good to give back. Anybody that's ever done that, whether you see somebody and you give them $1 on the street or $20, I mean, depending on the circumstances, it can really elevate your day and make you feel good to do
Mhm.
something to help somebody. So with those backpacks, we've got our employees will carry them around in their cars, forgetting when we'll pass them out at a school or a church or wherever the venue is. People have them in their cars, and if they see somebody on a street corner, they'll reach out and hand it to them. And some of the more satisfying experiences our team has is giving away the turkeys on Thanksgiving or backpacks for life. I mean, not getting paid for it. You're out on a Saturday or a Sunday doing it, and we hear how rewarding that is for them. And then employees, I don't like to call them employees, team members, thanking me for allowing them to do that. And I'm like, well, thank you. So,
Mhm.
no, you're right. I mean, giving back is such an important part of being a complete person.
Yeah, but you've been doing this for a long time,
Yeah.
and I think you're even though you're this dynamic attorney, uh, the people that work for you, your team members, they're more like family. You don't treat them as subordinates. You don't treat them as underlings. They're your family.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. Culture is number one at our law firm. We stress it. We have, all kinds of things we do to cultivate it. From one, just an annual staff meeting where we talk about it, but forget talking about it. We'll have, a day at the races and go to the racetrack, or we have a bar competition where if you build the prettiest bar, you get an award, or the best cocktail. We do all kinds of things, just team building things that are fun.
Hmm.
And it just and don't tolerate yelling in the office. You can't scream. If you get a
Oh,
screamer,
screaming! Oh man!
oh, when I came up, back in the old days, when I came up, I'd been in office, and that was, when I was in law school clerking, that's the culture. The old cranky senior partner at the end of the hall belittling you, thinking that that person's going to make you better.
Yeah,
you know, and
yeah.
it doesn't work. So I'm so proud, and I have to give my office administrator, actually COO, Shannon Barker, credit for that. She really stays on target and makes sure we consistently do that. And so I do give her a lot of credit for that.
But outside of the law, you've become more of, I don't want to say a train conductor, a coordinator, but you've had to learn more things probably outside of the law,
Oh,
marketing, book writing, all these things that a typical lawyer probably doesn't have to deal with because they're just focused on the law.
yeah, no,
I'll tell
that
you what, you've done a great job doing it.
well, I appreciate, thank you for that. I'm just going to sit here and take the compliments and thank you. But in law school, they don't teach you that law is a business. And I remember vividly in one of our classes where the dean was speaking and someone used the word business. And the dean took a time out and told everybody the law is not a business, it's a profession. And so they don't teach you all that stuff. And so a lot of lawyers never get out of that mode.
Mhm.
And so they are, I don't want to say just lawyers, but they don't focus on all the numerous hats you need to wear to make yourself a better lawyer, to make yourself give better service to your clients, to be
Mhm.
more successful and things like that. No, the hats I wear, there were no classes on any of the hats that I wear anymore.
No, but and we touch base on this off air, and it's you being real.
Mm.
It's and you convey that, outside of the law firm, and the people that know you, they see the real you on social, they see the real you in real life. What they see is what you're giving them. And there's this persona in law where, you know, lawyers are up on a pedestal, and they're looking down on their
Yeah.
clients, and it's you just keep it human, you keep it real, and you keep it respectable, and I like that because the fact is that we're all human, and
Right.
and you know, one person shouldn't look up to another in
Right.
awe. They should be
No,
treated as a friend.
well, we're all equals, we're all friends. I mean, the world would be a much better place if we could all get along that way. And I know you're the same way because I've known you for a long time on social media and over the years, and I see the things and privately when we've chatted on things you've gone through with challenges with family members and things like
Mhm.
that. And you remind me of me in that what you see is what you get. There's no facade. It's not garbage. And so I wish more people were that way. I mean, your word is your bond. You say you're going to do something, it's done. Don't need to shake hands. Don't need a contract. Don't need to do this, that, or the other thing.
Yeah.
And so,
Well, and what really impressed me too was when I told you I was going to France last year. You were telling me all the great places to visit. It was like, "Hey, we're like best friends, and you're telling me all the." and it was just great because I was hitting all these places, and you're like, "That's awesome."
Yeah.
And most people don't do that. Just
I mean, travel is one of my most favorite things to do, and I know you love to travel too. So here I am thinking I'm sharing with you, and I did share some stuff, but when you were up at Ez,
Mhm.
I forget it, was it your grandmother, mother? You have a relative that was born or raised there?
My wife's grandfather was born in Ez,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
So here's this tourist from Newport Beach trying to give a guy who's got a family member that was born and raised there some travel tips. But I loved watching. I mean, you really got into it up there, and probably because of that relationship.
No, yeah, it was, you know, but I didn't expect all the walking, and I probably should have.
Mhm.
And that raises a lot of questions because, you defend a lot of, not defend, but I would say, protect a lot of people who didn't think a situation was going to be as extreme as it was. You know,
Mhm.
there's a lot of steps in France. Oh my
Oh,
god, especially in Ez. And when you're staying in this Airbnb in the central of this castle-like structure, and you got to do 100 steps a day, you're not used to it.
right.
And I felt like I was going through physical therapy every single day, strengthening my legs and my arms. And good lord, after 90 days,
Yeah.
I felt stronger, but I didn't want to ever do those steps again. And
You're probably pretty sore.
these are the people that are coming to you. They're sore. They're beat up. They don't want to do this anymore, or they know that there's an uphill battle, but you're there to shoulder it, and you press on, and you give them strength and hope.
Yeah, well, it's it's like, at least the way I interpret it, when they call attorneys, sometimes they call them counselors at law. And I take that counseling part seriously, and I've been doing it long enough to see success stories where someone is paralyzed and they were maybe a superstar athlete in high school or college,
Mhm.
suicidal, and you're talking to them and they want to die. Sometimes they try. And because I'm getting goosebumps now telling this story, but when I because I've seen it so much, I try to talk to them, and I've seen so many of those people all of a sudden, 1 year later, 2 years later, 3 years later, case is over. We get them enough money to where they can't climb steps anymore, so we could get their house ramped out so they can get up and down stairs, but using a ramp, doors widened, and then some have become entrepreneurs. I've got a client that's got an art gallery in LA,
Wow.
and he's flipping houses on the side. And this person was suicidal when her accident happened. And I like to share her story with other people similarly situated when appropriate. You don't want to
Mhm.
ram it down anybody's throat because you know that you're not paralyzed and they are.
Right.
And, but man, there's nothing more gratifying than helping people go through something like that, kind of like a therapist, forgetting the money point of it. So, yeah.
Yeah, and one of the things that really surprised me is that in Europe, there is very little ADA ramps, nothing. There's steps everywhere.
Yeah.
There's no yellow stripes on the steps. There's no warning.
Yeah.
You fall, you fall.
No, you go to Ez, or you go to the Amalfi Coast to Positano, or any of those places with steps. No, I was going to interrupt you a minute ago, and I didn't want to interrupt. Not ADA compliant over there at all.
No,
You know.
no, and so my mother-in-law turned 80 while we were over there. We took her over there for her birthday, and she was a trooper. She got through all the steps. I did have to hold her hand here and there,
Mhm.
uh, but we logged about 55 miles of walking in 2 weeks, and that gets the heart pumping.
Well, that's why I always wonder when I go on trips like there's different kind of trips where you're laying on a beach or you're hiking around and exploring, and you're normally, or at least I'm not normally on those trips, going to the gym in the morning. You're not watching your diet. You should come home 20 pounds heavier, but you're walking so much. I've come
Mhm.
back from France and lost weight
Yeah.
and ate all that rich French food. So, yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
I came back from France with a new book, and people are like, "What? You wrote another book?"
yeah, yeah, yeah. Well. Well, yeah, I think you said you're over 60 now, so I mean, it's amazing.
Yeah, I mean, not they're not all mine. I've produced books for other people,
Right.
but, it's, I was inspired. Um, and the thing is that we here in America, I don't believe, put a lot of sense into our homes. The average person in America moves every couple years. You don't
Mhm.
see that in Europe. They
Right.
stay in their homes for decades and generations. And in fact, the place that we stayed in was in the family name for 9 generations.
Wow.
See, but you don't see that in America because, we don't wanna stay in a house for I mean, I've been in my house for 27 years.
Yeah.
But yeah, the average person moves every couple years, and it's just, there is no passing the next generation your home,
Right. Yeah.
but,
Mm.
you know, to kind of stay on that theme about passing knowledge, you know, you are in this position now that you and Bisnar had created this empire. And I'm not saying that it's a huge, but it is a very respectable law firm.
Mhm. Mhm.
And so the goal is you have all these great lawyers underneath you,
Mhm.
you know. Do they understand the culture that you brought in, that you created?
Yeah, no, they do. One, we talk about it all the time, as I was saying a moment ago. But as I get, later and deeper into my career, you realize, I mean, you want the law firm to continue on, and not so much just so I could make money off that. I've never relied on that as a retirement plan because I figured no one's going to take care of yourself like yourself, and so I'm not going to bank on that. But I care about the law firm continuing on because of the team.
Right.
We've got, people in there in their 20s and 30s, and I would hate to, hey guys, I just sold the law firm, bye bye, and now you're in your 50s and looking for a new job. So one of the things really, when I was younger, it was important to me, like, well, I got to have this thing to be able to buy me out and pay me at the end of my career. And the older, more mature I get, and more, just more fatherly of my teammates, I'm like, I want them to have jobs. So you're right. Um, we emphasize the culture to everybody, and we make sure that you buy into that. You can't fake it.
Right.
You don't buy into it, that's great. Go somewhere else. You don't have to buy into it. Um, but I really am grooming, and I've got a great group of younger lawyers now. And then a couple seasoned partners, and I'm glad they're there too because they've got all the experience. But with my auto defect knowledge, and that being such a niche we have,
Mhm.
it's like, okay, the auto industry will pay me because they go, okay, well, Brian Chase is going to go try this case, yada yada yada. Well, they need to have that feeling, fear, or fear might be the wrong word, but whatever it is, that this person's going to do a competent job. So I am constantly, especially in the last few years, and focusing on this last whatever 10 plus years I keep doing this, whatever the number is. Maybe I'll be doing it when I'm 90, who knows? Um, on giving the younger lawyers some of the auto defect cases that used to only go to the senior lawyers because me and them were just banging them out. Now each of the younger team members has a couple of these cases so they can learn, they can meet the other side and grow with the goal that those cases still keep coming in
Mhm.
even after I retire or quasi retire or whatever, because that is,
And
that's
and
the
that's
brain of the
and
firm right now anyway. Yeah.
right, and that's the legacy.
Yes.
So that the everybody that comes in not only understands the culture, but they understand the legacy. And I think that's the biggest thing right now is that, you know, I I started out in the cleaning industry, and everybody that's watched this program knows that I had 19 years owning a carpet cleaning business.
Mhm.
And I just found out that one of the suppliers called John Donne, it was a great business. I used to buy all the chemicals and, you know, training materials and got stuff repaired.
Mhm.
People cared. Well, a big company came in, bought them out, bled them dry, and now they're folding.
Yeah.
And so it creates this vacuum, this you know uh, in the cleaning industry that they're around. Where do I get my stuff from? You know, and everybody that was employed is all fired.
Yeah.
And so, although I haven't been in the cleaning industry for at least a decade, I still write articles for a cleaning magazine. And but for me, it's not about cleaning. It's about marketing. It's about legacy. It's about all the things that you and I like to talk about.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
I wouldn't want to sell the law firm, and that's the thing now. There are
yeah,
people, and there's legislation across the country, and I don't like it. But in the old days, well, and still today, it's still the same way. You have to be a lawyer to run a law firm.
right.
Okay.
Well,
But
I think in Arizona you can
right,
marketers can buy into law firms.
right, and that is a what appears to be a growing trend.
Right.
And they will ultimately, well, I don't want to say they will ultimately, but that is a growing trend. Corporations, hedge fund people are seeing ways to invest in them and to make money. And I think that's not going to be good for the consumer and the end
No,
person
and
at the end of the
here's the
day.
thing is if a marketer can buy into a law firm, then so can the insurance company.
Right.
And the
And
insurance company can go in and buy these law firms, and then they're protecting their own assets.
right. And I've had, and I'm not the only one. I know a lot of people like me, a lot of my brothers and sisters, when you're starting out, you're not well funded.
Yeah,
Okay. No one would give me a credit line or Bisnar and I a credit line. Now you can get whatever you want. When you don't need it, you can get it. But
right.
John and you and I may have talked about this back in 2018. We had like 10 credit cards with 10 grand each on it, and we had a $200,000 credit line, whatever. But to the point on these funders coming in, John and I, on a few occasions, 20, 25 years ago, would go try a case with a half a million or $1 million in it that we didn't have. I mean, it was over time we put it in. If we lost that case, we'd be in trouble. And you could have the defendant offering you 50 cents on the dollar.
Mhm.
And it'd be very easy to go, let's take it because we can't afford the loss. Well, we were never built that way. And I know a lot of lawyers like that. Now, if you have business people, non lawyers running the law firm, they might say, settle that case for 50 cents on the dollar. I care more about the profit and the bottom line. I'm not worried about that client. They're half at fault anyway. They deserve what they get, or whatever the story is. And I know, uh, I could think of a guy that had like 5 verdicts, millions of dollars coming in, and that was but a young lawyer, uh, took like 5 years to get any of that money. And, I think they were like, a week paycheck away from like, okay, we're going to have to close shop. And one of the appeals won and they got paid.
Yeah,
So I worry about businesses running law firms when you get into those kinds of situations and have to make choices over your own bottom line versus what's right for your client.
yeah, yeah, and I know that you've made some hard choices growing the business over the last long time.
Well, yeah, 30
Um,
years for me. Yeah.
but I think you've done a great job.
Yeah.
It's I look at what you're doing. I look at your team. I look at everything, and it's not just you, but you are the brand. People respect you. They see your videos everywhere. Now I am starting to see other videos of your team,
Mhm.
which is good. I think that people that go to the website to want to learn more about who they're dealing with, they can
Right.
experience who they are.
Yeah. And you're going to probably see a lot more of that for the reasons you've stated. I mean, it was always Bisnar Chase, and John was ran the business and the marketing. And then when he retired, I had to learn all of that stuff. But I was the trial guy. But I also realize if I retire or get hit by a bus, is the business still going to thrive? And I don't want people to go, "Hey, trial guy's gone.
Mhm.
Let's test these new people." So I encourage and do have all of our younger lawyers go to trial every year, smaller cases, building up to bigger cases to get that reputation.
Mhm.
So it's not just me. And there's no ego involved. I tell every lawyer I hire, and this can go back for over 20 years. Um, I hope you kick my ass and are so much better than me. And they're like, why? It's like, I don't have any ego. I don't need to be the best guy in the office. If
Right.
you're better than me and we have a couple people better than me, great. That's good for the law firm. It's better for your career. I'm fine with it.
Yeah.
'Cause I don't have an ego attached to
Well,
that.
yeah, and I think that's what good leaders do.
Yeah.
They hire people that not are not always smarter or more aggressive or take action, but they don't have egos. They want their people to do better.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's good for the business. It's good for the culture. It's good for that employee. You want them to be bought in.
Mhm.
Uh, and so, yeah, so that's important. So you will, I am grooming the younger lawyers more now than I did 10 years ago, because, you realize I'm probably in the last third of my career
Mhm.
versus the first third. The first third, you're building it, you got to get your own reputation to build it. And
But
I've got a tenure.
you're not hustling as much. You're working smarter.
Mhm. Well, maybe, maybe not. The beautiful thing is I get to 98% of the time do the fun stuff for me. It wouldn't be fun for other people. It doesn't mean I'm not up at 3 in the morning doing something,
Mhm.
but I've got it set up to where, which is why would I retire when I just get to do the fun stuff?
Right.
But my analogy, whether it's right, wrong, or indifferent, I don't know, maybe Harvard Business School would say I'm full of crap. And I don't know if that means anything or not. But what I tell young lawyers is, and it's true, I think, in any business, and you can tell me if it's true in your business and the people you work with, you're always a hamster on a wheel, and you're just a bigger hamster on a bigger wheel. And there are bigger hamsters than me on bigger wheels. But the minute you decide to get off that wheel and take a break, you start becoming Fred Flintstone or Blockbuster, and people are streaming and you're out of business. So I'm hustling, but you're right. You're probably right. Smarter hustling.
And the thing is, as I get older in business, and I've been a self-employed entrepreneur for 30 years. I don't take the calculated risks I don't take the risks anymore. They're more calculated.
Right,
So they're not. I don't consider them risks because I'm always looking at, okay, what's the ROI? What's this? What's this?
right.
You know, Early on, I'd be like, let's just do it. and, maybe that risk was what helped build what I have, but now I want to keep what I have.
Well, and that's a dilemma for all of us, and I think it's a dilemma for people that are worth 10 or 100 times more than there's some point where you might not worry about it.
Right.
But it is funny that you have to be a risk taker to be an entrepreneur, and you have to be comfortable living with risk.
Hmm.
Most people aren't, which is why people like you and I can have our own business. It's not that I'm the best or the sharpest, the smartest, highest IQ, but I wasn't afraid of the risk. There's probably a lot of lawyers maybe better than me, but they just didn't get the opportunity because they don't take the risk. But you're right. As you get older and you're accumulating, money so you can retire and live well and to give to your children or to charities or whatever you want to do with it,
Hmm.
then you start worrying about, well, man, if I take this risk, am I going to lose some of that? And I think you have to fight that mindset, and there's probably books on it because I need to start reading some books on that because I still read my business books and my spiritual books. But I really try to close off that thinking because I think it could then that's another form of fear,
Yeah.
or it can be. And that's not what you're saying, but I know the older you get, it's like I don't want to lose my shit.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like, okay, when I started this, I didn't have a home. I rented. Now I have a home.
Right.
Do I want to lose it? No.
No, I know. I know. It's
And and I think it's the same kind of mental attitude that people have when they get injured on how to select the right attorney. And yeah, I'm not saying that there's a million attorneys out there, but there seems to be a million marketers. Um,
yeah, yeah.
but there's only a handful of really good attorneys. You're one of them, but
Mhm.
you have to spend more time, I think, with people because of social, because of marketing, because of AI.
Mhm.
People don't trust anybody,
Right.
and it's what's the first thing that you do when people come to you? I mean, when they come in your building or they call you? I mean, you're just gonna be there to help.
Yeah, no, that's you want to make their I've actually discouraged people from filing a lawsuit, and it's not like I'm trying not to do business,
Mhm,
because I want the business, obviously. But when people come to me, first of all, you have to figure out what are their goals and objectives. Some people are, well, I want to be fairly compensated, whatever that is. Thank you. Other people are, well, I know, I don't care what my case is worth. I want to go to trial. I don't care if it costs $1 million because I want to punish that son of a gun. And it's like, well, your case is worth 15 grand. So, how is that going to work? So you
right,
want to find out and that's the exception to the rule, people like that. But you want to find out, do they just want to be compensated and rely on you? Do they want some sense of moral, feeling that the litigation satisfied some hole because of the injury? And then, and then some people that you can tell after talking to them, I'll say, now, if you're paralyzed or catastrophically injured and you don't have insurance, you're going to have to do a lawsuit because you're just not going to get what you need to take care of yourself. But
mhm,
for people that are lesser injured, I will tell them sometimes, know, this can go on for 2 or 3 years.
right,
It's not going to be fun. Just when you forget about your injury or what your loss is, the scab's going to get ripped off because you're going to get a phone call from me, and you can't emotionally or physically heal with litigation. Now, most people go through with it anyway, but I do let people know up front
yeah,
because I learned the hard way when I was a baby lawyer. Hey, you got a great case. Let's go to trial. Rah rah rah. 3 years later, I wish I would have known this 3 years ago. I would have never done it.
yeah,
Well, you only need to hear that a couple times as a baby lawyer to realize litigation serious, and people need to know what they're getting into up front.
yeah, it's I've written enough blog articles for lawyers that I know that it's emotional. I know that it's time. There's time constraint, and sometimes it can be years. And
Yeah.
and and you're gonna feel at your worst because you're trying to weigh your options. Is suing gonna be worthy of the time and effort and it's a lot to think about, you know.
Oh,
But you don't want to be injured all your life either. Um,
yeah, and you don't want to feel it's. I have had cases where I've just resolved a case recently in the last couple months for a lady who lost her husband, and it was for millions and millions of dollars, and it was a good result, and et cetera. But she didn't care. I'm sure she cared about the money, but that was not what was driving her. I swear, we were sitting in a mediation in my conference room, and she wanted to pray on it. So, you pray on it, do your thing. And then I come back in and I'm talking to her, and it was her deceased husband is what we were getting the money for. And she goes, I'm getting goosebumps again. She goes, my biggest fear. And I go, what is your biggest fear? She goes, when I pass away and go to heaven, I let him down and I didn't do the right thing.
mhm.
And so it wasn't about getting her $1 million or $20 million. It was, did, did, did she do right by him when she's at the pearly gates? Is he going to say whatever she was concerned about? Yeah.
And the thing is, there's only a handful of people probably that will think like that. The rest of them, I'm not saying they're gold diggers, but they'll want the most money that they can squeeze out of somebody, and maybe that's not the right approach. Um, but you always seem to balance it out. You know how to deal with these people, and it's not always about being, the lion that goes on the attack. It's sometimes it's about being the sheep and
100%.
calming people.
Yeah, no, I mean, every case is different. There could be, let's just make up a number, say a case is worth $5 million, but someone doesn't want to go to trial. They have all kinds of stressors in their life or whatever. And, they want to settle that case for $3 million. You have to do what's right by the client. You can't think about, oh man, that extra 2 million we're leaving that I can get if they let me litigate this for 2 more years. What's my
Yeah.
fee on that? And I don't want to say a lot of lawyers. I don't talk to a lot. I don't know how they think about that, but I'm sure there are those out there that will encourage them to go further. Um, but yeah, it's got to be client driven, and some of them it's for all the various reasons when they come to you. Of course, I want to maximize what I can get for them because that's all I can do. I can't bring back a loved one. I can't bring back limbs that don't work any longer. Um, so all I can get them is money. But if they want to stop where we're at, I'm not gonna artificially encourage them to go further just because of my fee. I may probe them on, hey, let's think about this for a week or two. Today's an emotional day, and sometimes it is, and they come back and go, I'm glad I had time to think. Let's continue. I'm not just like fish and cut bait,
Right.
but I'm never going to sacrifice a client's well-being so I can push a case a little further and make a little extra money because that's
Right.
just not what it's about.
No, and on the flip side, though, you're also going to have insurance companies, manufacturers like Tesla, whose lawyers are going to study your playbook, and
Mhm.
they're going to learn how to, try to corner Brian Chase and not necessarily the victim.
Right. Well, they try, and it's so funny because it doesn't. I've had auto manufacturers. 'Cause I've been doing this a long time, and I can think of doesn't happen often, but I can think of two or three occasions where the mediator would come into me, after we've been mediating for 6, 8, 10 hours, whatever. Well, Brian, they know that normally on a case like this, you've settled for this amount, or when you demand this, this is what you settle for, and they do try to come up with some metric. And there might be a sliver of truth in that, but what they don't take into account is what you and I were just talking about. I
Mhm.
may have a client that wants a pound of flesh, and I'm going to litigate even further, not knowing if I can get more, and I do. I may have a client at that mediation that day saying, I don't care what they have, I'm dumping the case today. So
Mhm.
I'll talk to the mediator about whatever numbers they're looking at. They can't say that that's Brian Chase's numbers. These
Right.
are client driven numbers. Also, every case is different.
Yeah.
With somebody speeding a little bit, with somebody under the influence, with someone not wearing a seatbelt, was it dark outside? There's so many nuances to a case, but they do try to pigeonhole you in. Well, let's just simplistically look at these cases. Here's where he is. Here's where I know he wants to end up, and it's not true, but they do try that sometimes.
So
The ones that do end up, they end up buying a trial because any big verdict I've ever had, I think this is universally true, and it's probably true with a lot of lawyers, is they think they have you for some reason, so they offer you peanuts. I mean, six figures on a multi-million dollar case. And if I've ever gotten a multiple 7 or 8 figure verdict, I've never gotten one where I've walked from $10 million. I've gotten one when I've walked from 200 grand or 500 grand. And the good lawyers don't really do that anymore. They shouldn't do that. They know you're going to try the case.
so how do people get a hold of you? Where do they go?
Yeah. Well, my social media feed, but no, I mean, since we're on here on your podcast, bestattorney.com is our website, which I teased John Bisnar for getting that corny, cheesy best attorney website 20 years ago. Now it was brilliant because I didn't have to go spell out something. So bestattorney.com is the easiest way. And then the office number, obviously, not obviously, but if you want to call is
And
949.
and you have locations all over LA,
Yeah,
or
all
is
over
it down
Southern
the
California.
coast?
Southern California, from San Diego up to Sacramento area, satellite offices. Yeah. Yeah. So if people, it's funny after COVID, now so many people don't even want to come to the office anymore, which
Yeah,
surprises me. And I try to encourage, most of my clients because I want to meet them.
yeah.
You can't meet somebody over Zoom, but we do have satellite offices where if they want a face to face, but they can't drive to Newport, we can go to our office in San Diego or Riverside or San Bernardino or LA or wherever for that reason to make it easier for the clients.
Oh, and San Diego's beautiful.
Love it. Yeah. Yeah. Like we were talking before this show, one of your friends that loves Southern California. I ain't leaving, brother. I love it.
Yeah, but and I'm not saying California is strange, stranger than Pennsylvania, although Pennsylvania has its ups and downs.
Yeah.
Every state, I think, is a little different when it comes to their laws, when it comes to their statute of limitations, and I think that also has to weigh into someone's case. Is their injury, California based? Does it fall within the statute of limitations? And I think people forget because COVID sometimes resets some of those numbers and confuse people.
Yeah. And, you know, we do cases all over the United States, and at any given time, I'm probably in at least 10 different states with lawsuits going around. And the laws are different in those states, and it does affect the value of the cases. Someone could come to me, you know, in California and say, on this type of the case, "Yeah, you got this great verdict." And their case would be, let's say, in a state that's got a cap on damages. I'll
Mhm.
say, you can't get that under any circumstances.
Yeah.
And so you do need to be aware of the various statutes when I am consulting with clients out of state and they want to talk about a result I got in California. Sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes they'll have to say that's going to be more difficult to do because of the laws in your state.
Yeah.
And especially you want to go to Michigan. I mean, that's where the auto manufacturers are. You know, that's a tough place to sue the auto industry.
Yeah, it's, yeah, the good old boys network, right?
Yep. Yep.
But,
Yep.
you're putting a dent. You are. You're having an impact, and, your reputation precedes you.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that. With regard to the auto stuff, that is my niche. You know, we've all stood on each other's shoulders. I think of my predecessors in the '60s and '70s. I mean, we didn't have seat belts, we didn't have airbags. I mean, cars are so much safer, and I like to be a part of that. And I was, you know, in the middle part of that fight up to and including today. But it's just all these great guys and gals around the country that do that kind of work that have made it much more safer around the world for people driving cars.
Yeah,
Because
and
left to their own devices, you wouldn't have an airbag or seat. It'd be a safety option item. You'd have to pay extra for your
yeah,
seatbelt.
yeah, it's, and I look at my own car, and sometimes I get confused because I'm like, I grew up with a key.
Right.
Now it's a push button, and, and then I used to have the gear shift on the side column. Now it's down at the bottom. I'm like, I get in the car and I'm still trying to find the gear. Like,
Well,
I've had this
I
car
thought
for 5 years.
well, I feel like that whenever I get a rental car, if I'm traveling, you know, on work or whatever, I'll get in a rental car and it's like, okay, how do I turn this one on? How does the gear shift work? How do I get my radio and my nav system plugged in? I mean, they just keep on
Oh,
changing.
I rented this car when we were in France, and it would beep at me because of the I was going over the speed, I was going under the speed, I was just and I'm like calling around, "How do you turn this off?" I can't st
It's funny. I saw a thing on, I think it was on Facebook a couple days ago. If you know what this is, you're old. You know how you see those things on there, and they'll have
Mhm.
something from the old days, and they showed the floor base of a car with
Oh, with the button.
with 4 pedals. No, the button one for the high beam light,
Yeah.
that I've seen that one. This one, it was, you know, there was 4 pedals down there, and I'm like, "Okay, the one on the right's the gas, the one in the middle's the brake, the 3rd one over left is the clutch,
Clutch, and
and then
then
the 4th one over was the brake."
yep.
Yeah. But, you know, my kids wouldn't know what that is.
No, and even school buses now are all automatic,
Yeah.
and, when I was in school, they were all stick,
Yeah.
and, yeah, a lot of things have changed, and it's because of advocates like you that are making sure that America is safe.
Yeah.
And I think here some of the laws that you help protect are
Mhm.
actually filtering out to other countries because now they're putting those safety things into the cars that are manufactured over there.
Yeah, I hope they are doing that, and they probably are. You know, you were talking a moment ago about legacy. One of the nice things, one of my favorite things is I've got a handful of published opinions in California. So long after I'm gone, if they don't change, lives will be saved because of that. But something I'm really proud of besides that, you made me just think of it. My son's in law school in Boston at Northeastern, and they have different laws than we have out here. And in his torts class and in products liability, when they're talking about product defects, they were discussing my case.
Wow.
And he's sitting there in law school going, "That's my dad." So maybe
and
they'll change
and
the law in Boston. I hope so.
and this is the reason I write books because I want the next generation to learn not only about marketing, about sarcasm, about whatever it is I'm writing about. And I've written books with lawyers and doctors, and so you're getting a perspective that's not only my own but for other people, and you know each one of us is a library of knowledge if you think about it,
For
and
sure.
and we have to pass that knowledge on to the next generation.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
so, I love that people are learning about you, in books in Boston, and your name's going to carry weight in the future.
Yeah. I hope so. I mean, with regard to that part of it, I love that. If I'm gone and some of the work I've done can help people not get injured or get easier to get compensated, mission accomplished with regard to my life's work, because I went into it to do that, and it's working out pretty well, and I'm
And
happy about that.
for all the listeners, Brian Chase is here to help you now and into the future. and, and that's his legacy. It's and this is the reason I bring brilliant people onto this podcast. It's not just about showcasing someone's superpower. It's also showcasing their legacy, what they stand for, what they believe, and what they're going to leave behind. And Brian is a um, great example of all three. And so if you get a chance, go to his website, bestattorney.com. Check him out. And if you are injured in whatever way, whether an auto accident or product defect, look their firm up because they might be able to help you.
Well, Rob, you keep up the good work too, because you have your own niche with your sense of humor and sarcasm. You should be a stand-up, and I should ask you, I don't know if you've ever done stand-up, but it's interesting to read, but there's always a lesson in it. And sometimes no one wants to read a boring lesson, and so keep up doing what you're doing, because I learned so much stuff when I'm just reading the various things you're doing. I'm going, oh, I'm going to try that next time. Yeah.
Well,
So,
the that's how the Rob versus books were born.
oh yeah, I
And the next series that's coming out this week is the Can Go to Hell books, and people are like, "Rob, that's a terrible title." It's provocative, yes.
Mhm.
However, it came as an inspiration because my daughter was dealing with a debt collector, and her debt was already past the statute of limitations, so he shouldn't even have been calling. But my daughter's like, "You can go to hell," and hung up the phone. And I thought, "Huh, it'd make a good title for a series."
Yeah, yeah.
So,
So next time someone says to you, "I don't like the title," say, "Go to hell."
that's right. Well, we were gonna say go to heck, but where the hell's heck? So it's like you gotta name it something.
I like it. Well, I can't wait to read it.
So anyway, for all you listeners, thank you. We'll see you on the next episode. Adios.
Thanks, Rob.